Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Okay, that sounded like a Britney song.
Yeah.
Right?
Hello and welcome to Frequency Broads. I am Victoria.
And I am Tara, and today we are tuning into finding our true self. And we're going to start by connecting together. And today I'd like you to place both of your hands over your heart, and we're going to take a humming breath together. And the reason why we're going to do that humming breath is to align with your resonant frequency. So, whatever pitch and tone you want to be in or length is perfectly fine. So, we're going to take an inhale together and hum it out. And another one just like that. Inhale and hum it out. And let's just take one more releasing breath to release any of that energy inside us we no longer need. Inhale deeply and sigh it out. I also wanted to state, as we're talking about our inner workings, that the reason, if you're looking at the video on YouTube, that I have this fun little heart makeup on, one, because happy Valentine's Day, that was 2 days ago. And two, my inner child is learning to express herself now through makeup. I'm not a makeup person, but she loves to do this fun little, not serious, just playful kind of look. And she's been playing with my outfits as well. So I figured, you know what? What better way to introduce her through this fun Valentine's Day makeup, because she wants to be a part of Frequency Broads now, and she's going to be here like every time. So just saying.
She is welcome every time. And if I could kiss those pretty little cheeks, I would.
Thank you.
You look beautiful.
So today we are going to be learning how to tap into those individual frequencies within us, what I like to call your inner universe, because there's a whole lot of shit going on in there, and how we recognize who's speaking and how we can tend to that, so that way we can access all of this light, all of this information, and use it in our daily life.
Let's go.
It's eyes in, baby. Turn those eyes inward and think about the different frequencies and energies you hold. I mean, when I say inner universe, I mean expansive as the universe. We're not going to be able to touch the tip of the iceberg, the amount of different frequencies we hold, but we're going to look at the major ones that play into our perception of life, in how we create our reality, and in our relationships. And I think the first one is our consciousness, our higher self, right? Because that is our essence that comes into this vessel. Wouldn't you say, Victoria?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that higher being is where you get your guidance from. It's where you get that gut feeling or your heart being pulled towards something. This is your true self.
Well, let's start at the very beginning and how we anchor our higher selves into our bodies, into these beautiful vessels we get to experience life through. How do we create a home within ourselves, the safe haven to turn inward? No matter what's happening outside of ourselves, we have this place to return to in our hearts, in our minds, inside of us, right? And I think that the more time you spend cultivating, building, developing, tending to the gardens within your mind and all of these intelligence centers within our body, the nicer place it's going to be. And when you have a really beautiful existence happening inside of you, it is immediately felt by anyone who graces your presence and can sense a deep sense of confidence, a feeling of being at home,
Mm.
and a general sense of just feeling really freaking good.
I agree that your body is a home. It should be a place that is safe. And I think what stops us from doing that is because there's like a whole family within you. And it's scary sometimes to face these versions of yourself or frequencies that you hold because some of them are not easy to handle at face value at first. And like you said, it's about cultivating and tending to that so that way you enter into this space and it's like a family gathering in a warm, homey, little cozy place to be. I know that's how I visualize it when I'm going to meet my inner child or my shadow. I literally visualize their home within me.
Mm.
And we've rearranged and redecorated and a whole kerfuffle of things. But what's my opinion is what stops us is that fear. What is going to rise when we face these things? What icky feelings or triggers are going to rise as we dive deep within ourselves and really look at these parts of us? But that's what you have to recognize is it is a part of you. And by denying the ability for you to be seen in your good, bad, and indifferent, you're denying that part of you. Then that's this place, your body is no longer safe. And then it's hard for you to, like Victoria said, anchor in that light being into this vessel and feel safe and like you're at home and not that you should be somewhere else in the cosmos, because you're accepting and loving and tending to each part of you because they're all a part of you.
Mm. That's so true. It's so true. Oh, I feel it in every cell in my body. Well, shall we start with the icky shit first?
Let's start with the icky shit. Should we start like at the icky, like shadow?
Real icky.
Real
Yeah.
icky. I mean, shadow, hold on, backtrack. Shadow's not icky. Shadow is difficult sometimes, but he, she, they is just trying to protect you. So I'm sorry for calling you icky. They didn't like that. They got offended.
When we first started brainstorming for this topic and you kept bringing up shadow, I have to admit that I was not able to really tune into my shadow or what my shadow looks like. And then I realized it's because I've been single for many years. And so my shadow shows up in different ways, probably not as intensely as if, you're in a relationship and or living with someone and having to face yourself through the eyes of your beloved. I've kind of had an easy past few years. I mean, well, except for being alone during a pandemic. But I created a home within myself and it was a really freaking rad place to be. So I can't say it wasn't too bad. But the shadow part of me, I mean, and let me just state for the record, I am definitely afraid of my own shadow if I like glance at it and like I'm one of those,
You're like, what the fuck?
I'm easily startled like that. But it got me thinking about my fears. What is it that hasn't been fully integrated that still shows up today, whether I'm in a relationship or not? And my shadow very much comes out to make itself known when it comes to feeling or being chosen. And in my time being single, of course, I've dated, I've loved, I've experienced a whole gamut of relationships that it's forced me to sit with the possibility of rejection. And if you've ever faced rejection, you know how painful it is, especially at first. And, if you really like someone and they aren't able to show up and like you or love you in the same way that you are hoping it will be reciprocated, it can be absolutely devastating and have you questioning what it is about you that they don't like. It's so important to step back and realize that it has nothing to do with you. And so when you start to think about all of these different shadows being cast onto you, whether it be direct projections through people's words or through emotional upheaval that you can feel empathically, we are constantly in this state of shining our light amongst others' shadows.
Mm.
And it's always a very special feeling for me when I get to be around those where we get to shine our light as brightly as it feels like shining. And we equally so accept the darkness that resides within us. And I've never really been afraid of the darkness within me. I am terrified of the darkness within others because of my childhood and living with parents who were emotionally unpredictable for their own reasons. But it brought about this fear in other people, and how it even shows up in my adult life is that I don't know how others are going to show up. I don't know how they're going to project.
Mm.
But what I do know is I feel safe within myself to handle others' projections. And it has taken years for me to be able to say that confidently. And I am so grateful that I'm at this point in my life.
Hell yeah, girl. Hell fucking yeah. And I think something important to note is that, this shadow comes about from traumas and challenges that you face, like you were saying with your parents. And I think a lot of people out there who are talking about spirituality sometimes have the lens of any negativity must go.
Mm.
And there's a duality in all of us in many, many ways. And one of that is the light and shadow. And the shadow is here to protect us. And we have to learn when it is safe enough that we don't know that we no longer need to be protected, right? You feel safe within yourself. You do not need to fear others' projections anymore because you can recognize that it is a projection of their inner universe, of their inner workings. But that doesn't mean that there will never be triggers and that there will never be turmoil, right? Some of us have gone through shit that's going to stick with us for a lifetime. And it's not about trying to shy that away or amputate the arm and be like, nope, you're no longer a part of me. It's saying, this is my shortcoming. And how can I accept and love it because it's just trying to protect me so I can remind it, thank you, but I don't need protection. I am safe. So my shadow tends to come out a little bit more frequently because I am with a partner. And I think that living with my partner and being so open with my partner, everything is free to come out. And I still need to be mindful of when certain triggers pop up and my shadow goes, we need to, right? You have your fight or flight. Your girl's fighting. She ain't flighting, let me tell you, okay? If she's flighting, it's because she already did the fighting. So my shadow comes out, fist raised, like, all right, what do we got to do? And it's my job to be like, thank you, but we don't need to fight. There's no need to fight. Let's communicate about this. Let's do all that. So personally, for me, yes, my shadow shows up in my relationship similar to you, Victoria, because of my parents. I have a fear of abandonment. I also have this like crazy independence, which I'm going to get into a little bit later. But it's interesting because it's not just relationships. my shadow shows up for me as well. And this is where I'm going to be extremely vulnerable and probably choke up this episode is I had like first let me say I am very grateful because all of the experiences that my shadow has experienced was short-lived, and I got myself the fuck out of there because of help, because of myself, because of whatever reason. So I know people have had it on a whole spectrum of traumas, and I just want to say that my heart goes out to everyone who's experienced any bit of turmoil, because we all have. And I'm not saying that it should be as easy as going inward and it's done. But I, for a little while, had an eating disorder of not eating and then binging and not eating, binging. And to this day, shadow shows up in the choices that I make. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get through. I used to hate the way I look. I used to hate what I saw in the mirror, and I've spent years and years working on that. And so that way I really love myself and I feel confident enough to put fucking 2 hearts on my cheeks and show up to the world. So she doesn't look in the mirror and have something to say. But when I make choices in the way that I eat, because there's still certain habits of avoidance or control, that's when she shows up. And it's important for me to say, no, this is why I'm making this choice. This is why this is the right choice for me in this moment. I'm not avoiding or trying to control, or I'm not trying to say that I don't look a certain way. So it's shadow is that person who's inside of you that's trying to protect you and say, let's not go through that again. Whether it's hating yourself or being abandoned or whatever. And the way that I tend to my shadow is releasing, journaling, crying, moving, whatever way that I need to release. So that way I'm not pushing it down and telling shadow she doesn't count. Because that's how she was formed in the first place, by being told you weren't good enough. So I lift her up and I say, have the floor. Not yelling at Andrew, but have the floor in my journal, have the floor in mirror work. Because you deserve to be heard. So I can stroke your head and tell you it's going to be okay and put you to sleep in the beautiful garden that is my home inside me.
Tara, I am so grateful you are in a relationship where you are able to meet your shadow, Andrew's shadows. It makes such a difference to be in a safe relationship where you are able to work through your shit together.
Absolutely. I am so grateful because as the universe, as I signed up for, he challenges those exact shadows. Andrew is a very healthy person. I mean, or at least he like aims to be. I mean, he's always like binge eating chocolate, but whatever. So he will make comments about my food or movement. And my shadow wants to be like, fuck you, bro. Like, I make the choices. But when I stop and think, what is he asking me? He's asking me if I ate today because he cares about me. So, like, I am very grateful because he makes me, and I'm sorry people have to like listen to me in like half crying voice. I'm sorry. But he makes me face my shadow. So I don't have to do it alone, and that I don't need to let him or her, whatever she is, they are, my shadow, have a front seat at the table. Because I know that there's all these parts of me that sit at the table and make decisions together. And when they're not aligned with each other, they can fight and it causes turmoil and projects out like crazy. So I'm grateful to have Andrew know about my issues and say, like, okay, how are we going to do this together? How are we going to show Shadow that you're safe, but still love her, because we know that she was like just doing it because you didn't want to get abandoned, which links to your inner child too, which is the next thing we should get to.
Oh, our inner child, our sweet, sweet little selves.
The innocence, the playfulness that has been squashed down by society is still living inside you and wants to express itself.
Maintaining a state of eternal curiosity is one way that I have found my inner child still gets to come out and play without, being a, obvious little child showing up as one of myself. But I always ask a lot of questions. I've always been a little question asker. Like, and I don't give a shit who I annoy. I want to know.
You're the kid in my class that's like, why? Why?
Oh, I'm
Why?
the why girl.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's
Unapologetic.
and it's how you find wonder in life.
Is it? I also think it's part of my subtle way of being a disruptor and making people question their own realities. So it's not always necessarily for me to know or find out. Sometimes I don't even care that much. It just kind of bubbles out of my mouth, and I then realize by the reaction I'm getting from the person that it could be triggering them a little bit. Maybe they don't want to ask why. Maybe they don't want to explain why.
That's interesting. So your inner child likes to push buttons a little bit.
She likes to fuck around and find out. Oh, yeah.
Do you see like a link to a time in your childhood that would make her be this way presently?
She never really got to be this way. She played by the rules. She still to this day does not like to get caught or be told what to do. So I avoided situations where I would be reprimanded or told it needed to be another way other than what it was, because I always felt like adults were wrong.
So your inner child's like rebelling.
It is, yeah.
I love that. She's like, you know what? She's breaking free.
She is. She's here to fuck shit up.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I just love, like, obviously a lot of us have to go through some process of reparenting ourselves. For me specifically, it started when I took my first spiritual course, and through guided meditation, she had us meet our inner child. And she was like, just say whatever comes to mind, whatever your inner child needs to hear. And for me, it was, that's not what love is. And that's when the shift to reparenting my inner child came, because I recognized the reason she was acting out, doing her little dance with Shadow and being like, let's fight. We got to look like Shadow's fear of abandonment and my inner child. Like, obviously it's linked because in my childhood, I was abandoned. So, they're linked together in that way. And it wasn't until I started to scoop up my inner child similarly to my shadow and be like, shh, it's okay. Like, that's not what love is. We don't need to express ourselves that way. That's not what love is. And there is that process of reparenting if needed, or just tended to the inner child before you could really embrace the rebellion of your inner child, or the playfulness or the innocence or the curiosity. So, that could look like facing your childhood traumas, whether that means by yourself in practice or in therapy or with your partner, and just recognizing where those traumas still play true. Because, I talked about in a previous episode, the filters that energy is running through before we understand what's going on. Well, if your filter's been damaged, you can clean it all you want, but you're going to know that there's always going to be a little nick in it. So it's about recognizing that and tending to it, and not trying to, like I said, amputate the arm and say you're not worth it. Because once your shadow, your inner child, fucks knows your inner teen, she's another one. Once they feel heard and accepted, then you have a home within yourself with a family to greet you and love you.
I just imagined all of these versions of you coming together inside of you, and it just sounds like it's an eternal party.
Yeah. An eternal party, and it's scary. Just imagine like 50 me's, sitting around the table all trying to talk at the same time.
Oh, they would.
They would, right? They would just
their hands flailing everywhere,
hitting each other in the face like, the fuck? We're
One of
crazy.
the one of the first times I encountered my inner child was I grew up going to this really beautiful hippie festival in Western New York
Ooh.
called Blue Heron. The headliner was Donna the Buffalo.
Mm.
And have you heard of Donna the
I
Buffalo?
have. I have.
Ah, awesome. Yeah, so this is like their festival.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. And so actually, we got to see the Avett brothers before they were famous years and years ago.
Oh,
And I
you're
didn't really like,
fancy.
I know, I was like, who are these bros? But I ended up taking LSD. I was probably
Mm-hmm.
19,
Mm-hmm.
and I had the most heart opening, expansive joy I've ever experienced. And the beautiful thing about it was I was able to, even to this day, come back to that state of ecstasy and joy from having my heart fully pour open and have love pour into it and feel mm, this strong sense of who I am as this love being. And I'm really excited to see this rise in psychedelics for many folks because it's really it's powerful medicine, and I so recommend doing the work ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to take LSD at a music festival is something you do as like a teen or as a young person, right? But when you're a little bit older and you are wanting to go deep in your healing, it is powerful, sacred medicine that allows you to tune back into that frequency even after you've sat with it. Meaning, you know, you have to do the prep work. You really do have to clean your energetic self, and I'm excited to talk about spiritual hygiene today. But there's this remembrance of the medicine that you can tune into the frequency of that medicine years after the fact. Like just thinking about that experience on LSD, I'm able to just feel this liquid gold, oozy, gooey feeling of just pure love.
Yes.
And when you get a taste of that kind of love, you realize the love that's been programmed into our relationships and into the way that we think love should be. It's all bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize you can love everyone. You don't have to reserve love for your significant other. And you also get to recognize that love looks different for each person because it's the two frequencies of you coming together that creates that very specific blueprint of love.
Yes, that harmony of your two frequencies. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why sometimes, like, you're getting along with someone and you're like, and then all of a sudden, like, that frequency shifts. You try to mend your frequencies. You're like, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think that it is a great tool when used properly, as many other psychedelics are, to get into that internal universe, because you have all these players at the table and you're trying to make these decisions, you're trying to align yourself, you're trying to heal and cleanse and all that shit. But it's unless you're paying attention to each individual player and how you play as a team to show up, you got to know what you're doing. And then when you dive into that realm, there it is, baby. And once you do it, once you're in there, it's like a map. You now know how to get there. Similarly to when you meet your inner child and where she's living in what part of your body and your shadow, once you go there once, you have the roadmap. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying you need psychedelics. I'm not saying you do.
No.
At all. I get to that state.
It's not for everyone.
It is definitely not for everyone. I know personally, the first few times that I took psilocybin, it was very overwhelming. Two, I did not like it because I was already so open, but not conscious of how open I was. And then psilocybin like really fucking ripped me open and all of this information, and I was feeling all of this energy, and it was super overwhelming. So we're not saying it's for everybody, but it's just a tool that you could use to help you access what's happening within you.
I could go on and on about the benefits of psilocybin, and I am a huge supporter of microdosing. I don't always necessarily think it's a great idea for most folks to go deep in the medicine. I think that learning to work with the frequency of the medicine is crucial to going deeper. Yeah, and you don't know how sensitive you're going to be until you consume.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming at it from, is that
I see that. Okay.
don't go off the edge from the get-go.
Like I did. Yeah. Don't do that.
Because then you're not going to want to try it for years and years. And that's not I think
no, I agree with you.
I also think it's important to ask the medicine to learn how to communicate with what you're about to consume. And when I started to practice asking psilocybin, how much should I consume? Should I even be consuming? It forced me into this realization that I really need to ask everything that I'm consuming, both my body and the food, the alcohol, the fizzy drink that I know is going to upset my stomach because carbonation just pains me to no other. Being able to communicate with the frequencies that you let interact with yours is a really great way to know if it's going to jive with you or not.
Absolutely, right? Think about, I love that you're talking about just the basics of like anything that you are putting within your body, right? That is why I feel, no judgment towards anyone, but why I feel being vegan shifted my spirituality so much, because I literally was not intaking suffering. That frequency of suffering was no longer entering my body. And with something like psilocybin or other psychedelics, like you said, you want to do the prep work because everybody at the table within yourself is going to take it. And how is that frequency of psilocybin or whatever going to interact with each one of those? And then as a freaking whole, right? Because it's all happening simultaneously, which makes it complicated to figure out who's speaking and who's running the show. And that's why having those clear channels like we've talked about, and like Victoria said, we're going to talk about spiritual hygiene, makes a big difference in being able to tend to and discover who you truly are when all of these speakers are aligned and in agreement with how we're walking forward and creating the reality around us.
Do you know what I really love?
What?
When I can't determine whose voice is speaking and my higher self chimes in and I know immediately. It's like hearing your mother's voice yelling at you to come inside, it's dinner or whatever. But our higher selves, that voice is so distinct. And once you tune into your higher self's voice, and usually she steps in and like gives it to me as it is. But lately, we've actually cultivated a much more loving relationship where she's not having to like, I don't know,
give you the hard
reprimand
slap.
me. Yeah, give me a little slap. It's more like a, hey, and like listen to exactly what I'm saying. Really feeling called to jump back to the topic of the shadow, because it is still kind of vague for me in my mind to conceptualize a shadow. And I'd like to put a little bit more of the emotions that arise that could contribute to the shadow showing up. And for me, it very much looks like shame and guilt. And so cultivating a practice of forgiveness. We are always told, to forgive others, but not forget, right? That's always I'll never forget. You hurt me. I'll remember for eternity.
Ooh, okay.
But also at the same time, I'm like, what about you
Yeah.
made you hurt me?
Right,
What,
right.
whatever. But I think about forgiving myself for all the times I've held on to guilt or shame. And as I started to dig deeper and realize the programming that coincided with this guilt and shame, it just it didn't resonate with me any longer. It really didn't feel like my own. But I saw all the ways it embedded itself in my thoughts and my feelings and how I show up in the world. And I started to really detach myself from some of these past experiences and these stories that I just felt like I didn't have to hold on to any longer. They no longer defined me. I feel so liberated. And to be quite honest, I feel like I've reached this point in my evolution where to think about my past selves or past experiences, it does not feel like me. That is not who I am anymore. And I refuse to carry on letting my past define who I am now. However, it is important for me to note I took time to grieve that part of me that I released. I did not just detach or disassociate. There's a very intentional process that took place where I said, thank you, but this is no longer serving me. I love you and I appreciate you for all you've taught me, but bye.
Absolutely. And I think that whole process comes with the exploration of what's happening internally. Like I said, figuring out who's talking and then accepting that, right? If you were resisting those parts of you, those parts of your identity that at some point were a part of your identity, then it would have stayed on forever. The fact that you were able to accept, forgive yourself or whoever else was involved, that's what allowed you to say, this is no longer me. And that is a difficult process to go through. And I'm glad that you made note that it takes grieving process, because you're not just leaving, bad behaviors. It's who you were. It's who you were. And it's okay that it's no longer who you are, but we don't want to shame who we were. Like you said, we want to forgive that part of us. We want to accept that that's what we went through and that's how we perceived it and responded to it.
Absolutely.
And I think that a part of that relieving what no longer serves us, letting go of the old identities, is, in my perspective, a part of this transmuting energy. And I feel we hear that word a lot, but we haven't really talked about what it means to transmute energy. And in my perspective, energy is energy is energy, right? Your frequency is energy, so is mine, whatever. But they can be in different states of being. They can exist in different areas of the body, in different realms and things like that. So the way that I visualize it is like water. And you can have your energy in this frozen state, in this liquid state of freedom. It could be a rushing river, huge waves, or it could be a trickling little creek. But when you are done with that energy, whether it's yours or something that someone projected onto you, it's about transmuting, shifting that energy into another state of being and taking this turmoil, this shadow, this old identity and saying, instead of calling you yucky and gross and ignoring you, I'm going to bring you up, give you a kiss, change you into love, and send you out to the universe or down into the earth or into my heart space or wherever that energy needs to go. But we need to be shifting energy, right? We call it filters and talking about things running through it. That means energy shifting. And if you're not transmuting this energy, you're stuck in these states, and resisting that is where you start to find more shame and guilt and resentment and anger.
I feel like one way to liberate yourself from shame and guilt is to reflect on your beliefs,
Mm.
to really sit down and ask yourself, what do I believe in? Do I still believe in this? Where did it come from? Is this my belief? Is it passed down through my parents or grandparents or caregivers? And I think when you start to have a conversation with yourself where you're able to meet your inner workings and the programming that has been, I mean, they've done a good job in programming us to
A very
be
good job.
right. And now we're all waking up. Many of us are waking up and saying, this isn't how it's going to be anymore. So there's this deprogramming phase. There's this unraveling, and the unraveling process is painful because you can lose grasp of reality. And if you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist or worked with one, or was parented by one, you have no sense of reality. Nothing seems real. And at the same time, there's another person defining your reality.
Mm.
And so when you start to see the truth for what it is, and you step back and become the observer, and to observe without guilt or judgment or any other spark of emotion is really difficult. So during this observer phase, as much as I think it's been indoctrinated in us to become the observer in a detached way, I don't think that's really possible. You're going to feel triggered by what you observe. And so that is the time when you are sitting in the observatory of your life and your reality, that it's really important to lean into your emotions that you're feeling and everything that arises. And so before entering into this observer state, I highly recommend having a confidant, a person, a therapist, someone to help guide you through that process, because that is the time when we don't need to go it alone, and I don't recommend going it alone. But what's interesting about having a guide during that time is you really do have to trust yourself to detach from whatever they're trying to project. And that's the thing about finding the right guide, is they're just going to be there to hold space for you. They're not going to be guiding you in a way where they're leading you to believe what they believe. They are literally there to hold your hand, to face your shadow, to face your fears, and to push forward to meeting yourself potentially for the first time ever. And so when you get to meet yourself, there's this chapter that begins where you get to write the script of your reality, and you get to program your thoughts, and you realize it all comes down to your reaction, your response, your state of presence in whatever is happening externally. But it often takes practice and a process to feel safe in allowing whatever arises to be met with love.
I love the question that you asked of where does this belief come from? Because that allows us to recognize who's speaking. And then, right, is that shadow? Is that inner child? And then again, dive a little bit deeper and say, okay, inner child, where did that belief come from? Where did you gain that? Was it because of the way that your parents talked to you, or a part of shadow for me was the programming of society? You need to look a certain way, right? So with asking yourself those questions, it allows you to go inward and start transmuting that energy, start that spiritual hygiene that we were talking about, this accepting of the emotions that are arising and letting that energy transmute through movement, through crying, journaling, through art, so that way energy can now shift out of the body and you can become the observer of that energy, right? When we bubble down our emotions that are arising from triggers, we cannot be the observer. We need to let it rise and feel it in order to observe it and see, where did this come from? And is this programming that I truly align with? And that's why I think cleansing and protection are also major important components of spiritual hygiene. And for me, the way that my guides have expressed the difference between protection and cleansing is, we have all these frequencies bubbling within us, right? And Victoria's talking about how those views, that frequency projects outward to create your reality. So if your beliefs are programmed from television or, not nice parents, then you're going to project a reality that is unsafe for you. It's not necessarily because of what everybody else, it's the programming you're holding within you. It's the frequency you're holding within you that projects outward. And while you're projecting outward, you're tapping other people's frequency. That's why you were affected by this programming. And that's why we say protect ourselves. When I say protect myself, and for me, that could look like a visualization of surrounding myself with white light. It could mean that I'm carrying a certain crystal or symbol that means something to me, or jewelry. Whatever you feel keeps your energy close, not close to the chest like you're hiding it, but like within yourself. So people can't come and latch onto you and like try to take away your reality and create their own. You're creating this shield, right? So when someone says, let's protect ourselves, we're not talking about hexes and shit like that, which whatever, maybe. But I'm talking about keeping my energy in here and keeping it clean and keeping it up to date and keeping it happy. When I talk about cleansing, that's the windshield wiper on the shield. It's just squirting off everybody's other bullshit that they projected onto me. So as much as transmuting the energy that is within your inner universe, within your true self, within those frequencies is important for hygiene, so is keeping that together so you don't lose pieces of yourself to society and other bullshit, but also wiping off the bullshit that's thrown at you. And I feel like those three things, at least for me, are super important to keep track of when I'm talking about spiritual hygiene, when I'm talking about tending to these frequencies.
I'd like to make note of our energetic field. And when I began to understand how far our energy stretches out into the world, it made me realize I needed to keep my energy concentrated and close to my physical body. And so if you were to extend your arms out and imagine, the anatomical figure, right? Your bubble of protection should be no longer or further out than the tips of your fingers. So if you visualize the tips of your fingers reaching up to about an arm's length above your head, and then rooting down through your feet anchored into the earth, that is how you form a protection bubble. And so when you are in moments where you are feeling energetically attacked, it is crucial that you learn how to activate this bubble and set up this force field of your energy, of universal energy, visualizing a white light, a golden light, whatever color light you go for in that moment. It works, and it is such a cool thing to play with, especially in public. If you feel like there is some sort of danger or attacker, or, well, I don't want to go that far as say an attacker, because that's a whole different ballgame. But if you feel like there is someone encroaching in on your energetic field, put that shield up, start playing with it, and see what happens.
And I love that you said start playing with it, because we're talking about cleansing, protecting ourselves, talking to our inner selves. You have to figure out what resonates with your frequency. So it seems like for both Victoria and I, that visualizing of the bubble is enough. But people also use things like different herbs. I know my mom uses salt a lot for protection. There are people that use symbols or certain numbers or words, right? It's about testing out when you're in public or even when you're by yourself. How does it feel when I use this herb or this oil or what, even with cleansing? I know there's a really big issue with using white sage. And there are so many other herbs and incense and just water. Channel into the water and say, cleanse my being, cleanse my energy. I always put water on my head. There are so many different ways that we can talk about how to cleanse and protect yourself, but it really comes down to you figuring out where you resonate, what is true for you. Similarly with transmuting energy, I can tell you for me, it's through movement and journaling and crying. But maybe some people don't like movement. Maybe they rather paint or take photographs. It's about being able to play around with these different frequencies, because we know everything holds frequencies, until you find what resonates with you.
While on the topic of tools, and I so honor each person's chosen tool or tools in their toolkit, one of my favorite ones is to get colonics. And
Ooh.
I am very much an empath, and I've noticed that when I feel like I'm taking on other people's shit, it affects my own.
Literally.
And it often leads me to feeling dehydrated. And
Mm.
so with the turn of each season, I will get a colonic, and I have to say it's my drug of choice, even though it's not a drug at all, but it is very much a high that I experience after feeling cleansed and
That energetic
recal
high.
that energetic high. But I feel completely recalibrated. I have this reset in my gut, and there's no denying the gut mind connection, and even looping in the heart there as well. Using colonic as a tool has also made me aware of how I'm an empath and how I can evolve to not have to take on other people's shit.
Mm.
I find being empathic as a valuable tool to picking up intuitively and feeling into how another is feeling. But it is so important to not take that on and to let that feeling settle or sink into your physical body or energetic body in any way. So I've made it part of my practice that when I am tuning into another person's frequency, I make note of it and I very intentionally release it. I say, thank you for telling me how this person is doing. This is not meant to sink into my body. This is not energy for me to transmute. I am not responsible for taking someone else's energy and transforming it and transmuting it into something else for them. I
Mm.
can hold space for them as they do it, but that is not my job. This is not what I signed up for. And having this realization has liberated me like no other.
I love that, because right there you're showing two tools, your colonics, but also just the intention and word of saying, this is not mine. Thank you, and I release you. So there's so many different ways that you can go about protecting, cleansing, and transmuting energy. But like Victoria said, it's important to recognize what is not yours,
Mm-hmm.
because it is very difficult. If I was trying to transmute energy that I was feeling from Victoria, but she's not in on the game here, all I'm doing is holding on and trying to shift energy that she's not ready to shift or doesn't even realize needs to be shift.
Realizing what's not your own shit is important, but equally so, knowing what is and taking responsibility for what is your own is what's going to take you to the next level of knowing yourself.
And projecting your reality.
Yep.
Right? To know thyself, to know who you are, you need to be able to recognize what shit you're putting out there and who is speaking. So when you turn your eyes inward and you can access these different frequencies, ask, where is this belief coming from? Tend to it, cleanse it, transmute that energy. Your channels can run clear, so you're not projecting your bullshit. You're projecting your highest self, your most authentic self, and you can create a reality that is worth living. So to meet yourself is to sit with yourself and go eyes in. Whether that be meditation, journaling, or art, it's allowing yourself to fully express what is arising within your body, accepting and transmuting what no longer serves you. Which takes us to our next episode on cycles and time, because all of these frequencies that are happening within you are not only at the table, but they're all going through cycles, and it can cause quite a mess if you haven't even met who's in there yet.
TikTok, you don't stop.
Oh, so tune in next week to learn about how to work with your cycles and how to play around with time.